Welcome back to World Beater Wrestling. Today's episode is all about the most common mistakes that coaches make in pro wrestling. I am certainly guilty of many of them. And whether you're a coach or just a student, this is going to give you a bit of perspective on what to look out for with quality coaching and quality schools. So the first one is just teaching wrestling, and pro wrestling is obviously a very diverse industry where it's not just about the techniques in the ring. It's about much more than that. It's not even just about the match structure and the psychology. It's about things like promos, about business sense, about character development, about emotion and storytelling. So you want to make sure that you can teach all of that, and yet it'll come at different times. Maybe bare bones beginners are going to focus more on those fundamentals in ring, but you want to make sure you're not neglecting certain aspects of performance just because you may not be as comfortable in teaching it. The second one is not teaching the why. I think it's very important to teach where things have their place in wrestling. If you're teaching a certain technique, well then show us how it applies in a match sense. Show it when it will work, when it won't work, and also give your students a chance to actually practice for themselves, not just in isolation, but also in a match scenario where things are going to be a little more real, because this is the way that learning sticks. If you look at a lot of educational psychology, for learning to stick, it has to be meaningful. And for it to be meaningful, there needs to be some real world application. The next one is overcomplicating, and this is something I still have to sometimes tell myself to rein back a little bit. You know, you might have a step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planned for your session, but if your students aren't quite nailing step 1, then there's no point moving on. You might have to go a different direction. So particularly with younger trainees or with less experienced trainees, making sure that you're working to their level, only giving them a few steps at a time. So make sure you're always assessing whether you need to make that focus just a little bit more direct. The next is not giving them any freedom to move. And as wrestlers get more experience, you want to kind of take the leash off a little bit and let them show who they are. Even in the early stages, you want to give them a little bit of independence from time to time. Let them think for themselves. Throw them in the deep end from time to time. When you make things too rigid and all you're doing is giving them spots and moves to do, you're not really allowing for any creativity, and you're not allowing for much failure. And of course, failure is the best way to grow. When it comes to things like working on the fly, well, if they're only used to working one way where everything's been laid out for them, they're told what to do at what time and what steps to take, they're not going to have that direct practice that's going to help them in a pro wrestling match when things are really going south. The next one irritates me the most, but free passes. And I find that many coaches just let people move on. They're not getting the technique, it's not clicking. They don't want to maybe hold the rest of the class back, so they just say, yeah, that's good enough, and off we go. I think it's important to be critical within reason. And if someone isn't getting something and you don't want to slow down the class, that's understandable, but make sure you don't just gloss over it. Figure out ways to incorporate it in future sessions. Give them homework tasks to complete. Make sure they know exactly what they need to work on. When you give people free passes, you're building bad habits, and that's only hurting them. Not giving constructive feedback, or more commonly giving too much feedback. People can only take on so much knowledge. So I like to stick to 1 to 2 of the most important bits of feedback they need to take on board. Things that are applicable, things they can apply immediately. And look, hey, if they got 7 things wrong in a sequence, telling them about number 5, number 6, number 7, and now you're 10 minutes deep in a spiel, you got the rest of your trainees standing at ringside, getting cold, getting bored, and the guy in the ring is just overwhelmed with information, it's not gonna do them any better. So keep it very simple, and if there are more things they need to work on, once they fix these 1 or 2 steps, maybe they can look to that later. And on the note of being constructive, you don't want to put people down too much. People want to feel good about themselves. And yeah, you need a hard shell. You need to leave your ego at the door from time to time. But if you're just cutting someone down over and over and over, they're not going to be motivated to get any better. It's really as simple as that. So the compliment sandwich becomes very relevant. Give them something they did well, something they need to work on, and something else to make them feel good moving forward. And finally, unprofessional conduct. I feel like we don't see as much of this anymore, particularly if you're in a reputable school. But as a leader, as a coach, you have a very important role. You are the role model. You are the person who's showing the younger generation how things should be done. And it's not always in your words, but it's often in your actions. So a coach needs to remember that they're on at all times. You can still be friendly with people, you can still be friends with people, but your main purpose is to show them the way and be a respected figure. So if there's any that you're guilty of or you've seen commonly, don't be afraid to drop it in the comments box below. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you next week for another episode of World Beater Wrestling.